Hello, my friends. I'm so glad you're back. This is Danielle with Inkworthy Books, and we are kicking off a new month, a new theme. And this month we are talking about mission-based books. What do I mean by mission-based books? This is writing a book that you are driven to put into the forefront of a mission, of something that you're really passionate about. Writing a book to share your story and get your story told is a wonderful accomplishment. And it's one way to go ahead and get your story out there and change the world. When you write a book that you want to connect to a bigger mission, it's about making it something a little bit bigger. So we will continue talking about this, but there is one type of book, if you will, within this realm that I want to address in today's video, and that is books that want to break a stereotype. We all have probably been subjected to assumptions based upon stereotypes. For example, based upon our gender, our color, our race, whatever it is. I have gotten a lot of stereotypical behavior related pointed to me. I don't know how to say that. People act a certain way towards me because of the stereotype that I was young or I looked a certain way. I've always had an elevated position in the workforce, and people didn't really understand how I got there. So they treated me like they would treat a young girl. And so anyway, the point is, we all know that it's frustrating, to say the least, to be subjected to people's behaviors that are based upon stereotypical thinking. They are thinking a certain way because, well, that's just how those people act. We want to share our message sometimes to break that type of thinking, to bring a new perspective to that place in the world, to help people broaden their perspectives and open their minds and open their hearts and not be so narrow-minded and narrow-seeing when they interact with other people. It can not only bring a lot of healing to people within that group that, or within, I guess, any area that is feeling stereotyped, but it can bring a lot of healing to the world in general. So this is one of those things that people attach to their books as part of their mission. They want to break a stereotype. So let's talk about a couple of the things that, if this is where you want to head with your book, that I want you to be aware of. Number one is your tone. What you don't want to do is come across defensive or aggressive in your tone. Just sharing your story and letting them know who you are and how you be, what the truth is, what your truth is sufficient to break the stereotype. You don't need to be attacking people in your story. Of course, you're going to tell your story as it happened. This is your memoir. This is based upon events that played out in your life. This is not necessarily going to be like a nonfiction book about, hey, how do you start breaking stereotypes, whatever. It's not going to be a how-to or teaching type of book necessarily. If you are writing a standard memoir that's story-based, what that means is that you're just sharing your experiences. And if you have experienced feeling stereotyped and feeling like people are unfairly categorizing you, then giving us the stories, the experiences, the emotion behind experiencing that, but also behind the truth of why that was wrong or harmful, that's going to be sufficient enough. And you really don't have to do that aggressively or defensively. You don't have to go on long tirades and long rants in your book about why people need to stop doing this. You can just express your feelings in a healthy way that allow us to see that you suffered because of this, and allow us to see that that type of thinking really wasn't that helpful. It didn't help you, and it's not helping other people that might be feeling similar things or dealing with similar things that you are sharing in your story. So for example, This is kind of an easy one. I also have a client working on a book in a similar area, but let's say you struggle with depression or anxiety, a mental illness. Mental illness is such a prevalent category for this particular topic. People who have a mental illness often feel that they are treated differently because of a stereotype. For example, if you have anxiety, are you always going to just freak out when things don't go right? Or are you, if you have ADHD, are you someone who, what's the stereotype for that? Oh, you can't sit still for more than 2 seconds. It's not helpful to think that way. That's the stereotype that you are trying to break, right? So if your story shows us that, oh, there was a teacher in school who always thought that you were, the kid who just wouldn't sit still, and they treated you a certain way that really was unhelpful, that didn't support you in school. Or you had a teacher that treated you the opposite way, that this teacher knew that you needed a different type of learning environment, and it didn't mean that you couldn't sit there. It just meant that you weren't engaged in that way, or that the messaging in a traditional classroom setting wasn't getting across to you because it just wasn't something that worked for you. It wasn't because you were ADHD and you couldn't sit still and you were a problem child, right? So you can kind of just see, by telling us that you experience these things, we are going, oh, okay, well, I guess I have always thought ADHD was just someone who couldn't sit still because maybe I'm just uneducated, and that's just how I've never looked into it, right? So I'm operating based upon the stereotypes in that scenario. If your book tells me this is just not the way it is, you've already helped break that stereotype in me. And then I can go out and continue the conversation with others. I can go out and support my family and friends and coworkers and contacts and connections, and spread this word and know that I'm able to serve them better and able to communicate better, and I understand them better, right? Isn't that really what this is all about? Being more understood? So again, to my point, make sure you watch your tone. You don't want to come across aggressively or defensively. You want to come across as honest, vulnerable, and with just a sense of confidence. Like, this is who I am, this is how I am, this is what I experienced, and it doesn't need to be this way, right? Okay, so number 2, what I want you to think about when you are on a mission to break stereotypes. If you are writing a book that is very directly angled to speak to people who have those stereotypes, so for example, if you are writing that book about dealing with your ADHD and always coming up against people who have this wrong perception of what that means, if you're writing to those people, you have to make sure that there is a way that they will be drawn to your book. So if I'm the person with the stereotype and you are writing to me, right? I'm the person who has the perception that, oh yeah, those kids with the ADHD, they just can't sit still, and God, they're so annoying. They're just so wild and whatever, I have that's my thought process, and you are trying to reach me. What are you going to say in your book? What are you going to say in your marketing? What are you going to say in your blurb that I'm going to be attracted to? ADHD isn't just kids who are, wild and crazy. We deserve love too, whatever. Like, I'm just clearly making that up. But my point is, are you going to attract the people that you need to attract in order to break that stereotype? What am I going to be drawn to about your book? If I don't suffer from ADHD and I'm not looking to read other books that help me understand this because, well, that's just not for me. I don't deal with that, or I've had bad experiences with people who have ADHD, so I'm just not interested in that. I'm the type of person you want to kind of help get the message across, right? So there may be a way that you can share your book that reaches that type of person. And if it doesn't, you need to understand how to reach the people that will be drawn to your book and foster an environment of, word of mouth, just trying to spread this, right? Trying to talk about this. encourage them to talk about their experiences as well, so that more and more people are talking about this, and that it increases the chances for people, like me in this scenario, not Danielle, but, someone who needs to hear this. It increases the chance that person will hear it. If I'm not going to read your book, you still want me to hear the message. How do you do that, right? You do that by just encouraging the people who are reading your book to be open and honest and vulnerable with their own stories. And you do that by writing in your book your own vulnerabilities and your own struggles, your own honest struggles, okay? It's very, very difficult. It's really hard to just put some of these things on paper, right? It's just hard. And so if we pick up a book that shows us that this person just bared their soul, we're going to be inspired and connected. I can tell you this for a fact. I've experienced this even writing just short stories. People are like, you're encouraging me, you're inspiring me to tell my own story. That's what happens. When we tell our story, we encourage others. So what you want to do is use your book as the platform to show people that it's safe and okay to share their story. And then you get out there and talk about, hey, my book really illustrates the truth of what I went through, and I just want to be here as a voice, lending some perspective to this bigger conversation that needs to happen. ADHD isn't just people bouncing off the walls and not being able to sit still. It's just a different learning style. We're hearing terms like neurodiversity and all of that. That's a big thing. We need to keep talking about that. But if people do not continue sharing, or if people stop talking about it, or if you were to write your book and not talk about it, you're dropping that ball. So if you're attached to the mission and you are passionate about getting this message out there, make sure that you are able to continue communicating with the people who need to hear you and encouraging them to continue talking about it, because eventually people with a closed mind, I hate pointing to myself like that, people with a closed mind, people with closed ears, they can't ignore the majority voice eventually. If everyone's really trying to talk about these things, they will eventually hear it. You can't force someone's mind open. You can't pry, get a crowbar and pry it open. But you can continue talking about your own story in hopes that they will hear you someday. That's the best you can do, right? So the messaging here is that you can certainly write a book that aims to break stereotypes. Watch your tone. Make sure you are just getting your honest, vulnerable truth out there, and the right people will hear you. And they will appreciate you, they will see you, they will understand you, and they will feel more understood in the process, which just perpetuates this kind of ripple effect. You're just going to drop it in the bucket and watch the ripples spread outward as this message continues, okay? So that's one way to write a mission-based book. We're going to continue talking about this in other aspects. It's a really fun topic. It's really broad and also not broad. So just come back for more videos and we'll continue the discussion, okay? See you soon.